Hello and welcome to Gardening of 58 North. So in this video I'm going to be planting up these two new planters at the front of my house, and I'm also going to be giving you guys an update on my winter bedding plants. So I'll start off with the update on the winter bedding plants, and then I'll start planting up these two whiskey planters. So it's been quite a hard winter. We had some hard frosts, about -15 was the coldest it got here, and these plants looked really quite poor in that state. The ornamental kales here, these all shriveled up. They're about half the height, they're only about this tall when we had the winter and were covered in snow. And the violas as well, as part of their defense against cold weather, what they tend to do is shrivel up and they look completely dead pretty much. But once warm weather arrived, they perked up, and we've had some sunny conditions for the last few weeks. We've still been getting night frosts, but it's been about 10-12 degrees during the day and relatively dry and sunny. So the violas have done really well. You can see they're all starting to flower nicely. Now all the things in this bed that look like grass, these are actually the crocus leaves, so that's why I've left them. There is a little bit of weeding that needs to be done. You can see there's a little bit of grass coming up here. We've got some dandelions, but it's not too bad for weeds. What I'll probably do is weed this once the crocuses have died back a bit more. I don't want to really damage too many of the crocus leaves. I'll also mulch this as well to keep down some of the weeds, because there's definitely going to be more weeds growing as the summer goes on. I'm not going to dig this over this year because I dug it over last year, put in loads of goodness, put loads of compost and slow release organic fertilizer. I can't really dig this over now because I have all of these plants growing in it. It's not just the winter bedding, I've also planted this up with gladioli at the front and also some giant tree lilies at the back. So if I was to dig this over, it would damage it, so I need to leave this really just as it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mulch it and just have it as a no dig sort of bed, mulch it with compost or some kind of organic mulch to add to the soil. Also add slow release organic fertilizer. I've given a quick sprinkle of Growmore, which you can see there's little granules here. This is just a chemical fertilizer. I just want to give it an instant boost because these are just starting to come into flower. I want these to have all the nutrition that they need. What tends to happen with the ornamental kales is when they go into flower, they start taking out all the old nutrients from the leaves. That's where they store their energy and nutrients over the winter and put it into flowers. And if they don't have enough feed in this stage, they tend to lose a lot of their lower leaves and they won't flower for quite as long. So these flowers are all developing nicely now. They should be bright yellow when they come through. At the moment they're just in bud, and it's mainly the leaves at the moment that is the feature of them, that nice purple colour. But these flowers are going to be really tall, probably about 1.5 meters or 4 foot tall once they get going, and they'll be nice bright yellow flowers. And by the time they're finished, I'm hoping that the giant lilies will be coming up. When it comes to the violas, you can see that they're all doing quite well. Some better than others. These will continue to grow, but if it does get very hot and dry over summer, they might peter out and die. Normally in Scotland it's cool enough though that violas normally flower the whole winter and then right into spring and the whole summer as well, so hopefully they'll be fine. Over this side is a pretty similar story. A lot more bulbs on this side though, so that's why it looks a lot grassier. And there's also a few more dandelions, so this area probably needs a bit more weeding, but generally quite happy with the winter bedding plants. They've been giving me colour all winter, and now they're going to go from purple to a bright yellow colour. So the front of the house here is a really sunny spot. It's mostly east facing, but it's slightly south facing as well. So what that means is it gets the sun first thing as it rises in the northeast. Because we're here in Scotland so far north, the sun actually rises in the north in the middle of summer. So it gets the sun first thing around 4 o'clock in the morning, and then it gets it all through to midday. And because it's faced slightly south facing, it does actually get sun almost into the evening. Depends where you are on this part of the building. So where the planters are, I think the sun lasts till about 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. But where these kales are, it's about 4 o'clock until the building then starts to shade out the rest of the bed. So it kind of creeps forward, but quite slowly because it's slightly south facing. So it's really sunny position. You've got the white render wall there, which is really reflective. It's actually quite dazzling to look at this morning because it's so sunny. So it's going to be a really good sunny location for some plants. So I'm going to put 2 banana plants in here. I'm going to go for Ensete ventricosum, which is the Abyssinian banana. It doesn't really need such warm conditions, but because it's quite cool here in Scotland, the more heat and the more sun I give it, it should do better for it, because our summers are so cold. I need to do everything I can to give it the best conditions I can give it. So I'm going to use these 2 whiskey barrels, partly because I think they look a bit nicer than just standard pots, but one of the main reasons is cost. I'm living up in North Scotland near the Spey Valley, and it's the biggest whiskey producing part of the world. Or certainly biggest whiskey producing part of Scotland, I think probably the world as well. So there's actually a massive surplus of old whiskey barrels everywhere. They're so cheap, people actually burn them for firewood up here because they're oak. They're really high in calories for burning, so It's quite common to see people burning these, but you can also buy them very cheap. So these are only £15 each. If I was to get a pot this size, you're looking more like £40 or £50 unless they go for plastic, and then it wouldn't be quite as durable being plastic. But these are huge. I think this is a 100-litre barrel, or possibly 200. I'll put it up on the screen now how big it is. So they're really quite big, and obviously half of them, because these are half barrels, you can see where they've been cut in half. Basically this was the stopper for getting the whiskey out or into the barrel, and so that's where the half mark was. So these are half barrels. But whiskey barrels are quite useful because they're oak, they last quite a long time. They're quite resilient to rot because it's a very dense hard wood, and it's usually oak that they use. The other handy thing is that they char the inside. You can see that's why it's black. That charring process, it helps preserve the wood a bit longer. And so this should last quite a long time. I've known some of these people have these barrels for 20-30 years before they completely rot away, so it should last quite a while. But what I need to do is I need to make some holes in the bottom. Being barrels, these are completely waterproof. If I didn't drill holes, these would just fill up with water and they'd basically be like ponds. So I'm going to drill some holes in the bottom now. You can see there, it's completely sealed at the moment. Same with the other one. I don't know why the other one's been charred and that one hasn't, but this one's got charring. It's even got some kind of hessian for helping with the sealing, I think. But yeah, I basically need to drill some holes in these now to make sure that they're free draining. I'm probably just going to put 3 or 4 holes in each one, and I'll show you the bottom actually, how it looks. That's how the barrels look. I'm not sure which distillery or which whiskey it is that whiskey distillery this has come from, but they do smell really nice. When I picked them up in my car, the whole car was really stinking of whiskey. Really nice smell if you like whiskey. If you don't like whiskey, then probably not a very nice smell. But yeah, these are pretty solid. Although these are second-hand old used barrels, they've been sitting in a damp warehouse, but it hasn't been too wet to cause any rot, so the wood's still in good condition even if it is quite aged. I might change it in the future, I'm not sure. At the moment I'm just going to leave it as a rustic kind of appearance with these rusty iron rings and the old weathered wood. But if I want to, what I could do is sand down the wood, sand down the metal, repaint the metal with maybe like black or something, or silver, and varnish the wood to make it look fresher but also to make it last longer. But for now I'm just going to leave it. I think it should be fine as it is. So I'll go ahead now, get my drill, and I'll make a few holes in the bottom of these barrels. So that's both the barrels now drilled. The smell is actually really nice coming from the barrels. The whiskey has to sit in the barrels for about 12 years here in Scotland. Some of them 18, some of them 24 years, depending on the type of whiskey. So it's got years and years to soak into the wood, and there's still a lot of whiskey inside this wood. So these shavings really smell very strong of whiskey at the moment. So I'll now show you what plants I'm going to be planting up in these 2 whiskey barrels. The idea, as I said, is to plant up some banana trees in the middle. It's too cold at the moment. It's currently April, and here in Scotland we're still going to get frost right into May, so what I need to do is wait until June to plant up the banana trees. So the idea is I want to have something in there to look nice. So what I've gone for is Senettis. Senettis are really, really colourful plants. This is the picture of the flower there. There's lots of different varieties. I made a video about looking after them before. I'll put a link in now so you can see that. This is one of my favourite ones, where it's got the 2 colours, magenta and white, but they're really strong colours. Like, the colours are so vivid they almost seem to hurt your eyes, they're so bright. So the idea is these are going to go into the middle of the barrels where the banana trees are going to be going, and then I'll remove these once they're finished flowering and I'll replace them with the banana trees. Around the outside I'm going to be growing violas. Now it's such a hot sunny position here, I'm not sure if these will last the whole summer. Let's say normally in Scotland violas last all summer no problem because our summers are quite cool, but it's a very hot sunny position here. If these do grow over, I might replace them with something like lobelia later on in the year, so they can trail down and look nice. But for now these are going to look nice over spring and early summer, and if the weather's not too hot then these will also last the whole summer long, and they'll be quite low down and they should trail slightly over time if they do last the whole summer. And I think that will look quite nice next to the bananas, because the banana trees will grow tall, big leaves, and around the base of the trunk it's quite bare, there's nothing growing there, so these will just kind of fill in that gap. So I'm going to plant up these viola plants at the bottom. The Senettis, what I'm going to do with them, these are, if I planted these directly into the compost, it would be a little bit difficult to remove these because the roots were spread out and I damaged the roots. So what I'm actually going to do with these is I'm going to repot them into much larger pots. I think these are 1 litre pots now. I'm going to put these in a 2 or 3 litre pot, and then I'm going to sink the whole pot into the compost. The idea is I can easily remove these. There might be a few roots rooting out of the bottom of the pot into the main body of the compost in the planter, but these will be easy to remove. It shouldn't be an issue. And then I can just put in the banana plants when it comes time. And putting these in a new pot, not keeping them in their existing pot, gives them a lot more space to grow. And these should become quite large plants. They're just starting to flower now, but as they start to flower, they put on a lot of growth, a lot of height, and they become much bigger. So I suspect these will be about 2 or 3 times the size by the time they're in full bloom. So when it comes to the compost itself, I'm going to give this quite a rich mix in these barrels, because the bananas are big, hungry plants. They like a lot of water, they're quite thirsty as well. So they need lots of feed, lots of water. And because they're in pots, I don't want to have to be watering them twice a day. I need the compost to be able to retain a lot of water, so it's not a daily watering. I can maybe get away with just watering every couple of days. So I'm going to be using a very rich multi-purpose mix. Now there's a couple of reasons, but I'm going to be also adding soil to the mix. One of the reasons is I have too much soil in the garden because I'm doing a few garden works. I'll be removing some of the soil, so it's handy to use. Also, it's a very poor sandy soil which is very free draining. That will just help the mix be a bit more free draining. I'm worried if it's a bit too heavy with the rich multi-purpose compost, the drainage won't be too great, especially being in a sealed barrel. Even with these drainage holes, there's still a bit of a risk of being waterlogged, so it should just break up the compost slightly, make it a bit more free draining. And also I find that if you just have a pure organic based compost, if you add a bit of inorganic matter such as grit, perlite, or ideally loam based soil, it just seems to help the plants grow a little bit better. And also over time, compost tends to degrade and compact, and it gets quite a lot smaller as it decomposes. If you can add some soil to the mix, it just reduces how much that will shrink down in size over the summer. So it won't shrink quite as much because that soil level doesn't shrink. There's just the compost section that shrinks. So I put a mix of soil and compost in here. The top layer I'm just going to put compost because there's a lot of weed seeds in my soil. I don't want this whole thing to be covered in weeds. Having a nice mulch on the top of compost will keep the weeds at bay. So go ahead now, fill these up. So that's the planters now both planted up. So they look a little bit sparse at the moment because I've given the plants space to grow, but these will grow quite quickly. What I'm going to do next is actually remove all the flowers on these violas. I want the plants to bulk up and give a better display in the long term. I could leave these flowers on, but what would happen is I'd get a good display now for the next couple of months, but in the long term the plants would grow slower because they're putting a lot of energy into these flowers. And also the flowers, especially with violas, when they get really large flowers or when you have pansies, they start smothering out the leaves, they do start to shade themselves slightly, so they will grow a little bit better if you take all the flowers off, let them get established, get them bigger plants, and they'll just fill the space a little bit faster. The other option is you could just plant them closer together and fill the space that way. But if you've got quite a lot of space you need to fill in, if you cut them back, they'll just grow faster and fill the space a little bit more quickly. So these plants should do quite well here. They should grow pretty fast. I'm going to have to give these a good soak as well. Now when it comes to compost height, you can see it's quite close to the surface. This is a bit fuller than what you'd normally like a planter to be. It makes it a little bit difficult to water. The reason being, I've loosened this compost up, it's nice and loose, and as soon as I start to water this, it's going to sink down, and also with gravity over time, this will also sink down. So it will probably sink a few inches down to about this height, and so that just allows it to sink a little bit without looking too empty. At the end of the year, we'll actually have to top this up because it will sink that much. But these should do quite well now. Let's say I planted up both of them. The violas I'm hoping will go for the whole summer if I can keep them well watered, but it is a real sun trap here, and once they get some sunflowers and also some giant lilies to grow, it'll be quite a sheltered spot, so these could well get quite hot. So I'll see if they survive or not. The Senettis, they really like cool conditions as well. When it gets too hot, they kind of go over. Parent plants from that these hybrid Senettis have been bred from come from cool mountainous conditions in the Canary Islands, so they don't like it to get too hot. So when these will come out when it does get warm, and then the bananas will replace them. What I'll do is I'll cut these back, put them in a cooler location with a bit more shade in the garden, and these will be ready again to flower in autumn time. So that's them pretty much planted up, and now I do have quite a lot of space still, and I've got several other planters to plant up. These two at the front of the house, these are actually cast into the concrete. I can't move them. They're all chimney pots, I believe. The rose on the right is quite nice, so I'll leave that. The tulips, they'll be finished soon, so I'll probably put something in there just to give a bit of colour. The initial thoughts was I might actually build a green wall up here on this left-hand section, so I'll do a video about that when the time comes for that. I've also got several other pots that came with the house. You can see a few of them here. Most of them are empty, to be honest, or they've got a little bit of some plants actually self-seeded. These violas actually self-seeded from one I had nearby last year. There is a nice azalea here though, so I'll put that back by the front door. That's going to be covered in flowers soon. This flowers really nicely actually. And I've also got the self-watering container here. I did actually have this planted up with antirrhinums last year, but the antirrhinum rust completely killed them off. And so what I've got now is basically just a load of weeds on the left here and some self-seeded strawberries. So I'll probably keep the strawberries. They look like they're of the cultivated variety, not the wild ones. So these will produce nice fruit, so I'll keep them. For the rest of the trough, I'll probably clean it up. I'll maybe add a couple of more strawberries. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this trough. Or transplant the strawberries somewhere else and fill this with bedding plants. But it certainly needs a clean. You can see all the dirt from the heavy winter rains. It's looking rather messy now. So what I'm going to do now is deadhead those violas, give it a good watering, and I'll put a photo at the end of the video in a few weeks' time, show you how much they've grown. Should be filling out nicely. We might even be getting some of the first flowers appearing on the Senettis there. My plan for this front area is to fill it absolutely full of flowers in summertime. It's too early at the moment, there's still a chance of frost, and actually the Senettis can't take a hard frost, so I will need to cover them in a horticultural fleece if we get some hard frost, because they could get killed by the frost, so that's something I need to be careful of. Senettis are a bit difficult here in Scotland, although we've got a great climate for them. In spring they can get caught out by the late frost, so that's something I have to watch out for. So for the rest of this area, as I say, I'm going to cover it up with bedding plants. There'll be summer bedding plants, and I'll need to wait until May, at least until May, and probably into late May, early June, just to make sure the worst of the frosts have gone. Then I can plant up this area with bedding plants for the summer. I'm going to have lots of pots, as I say, for a green wall up there, and hopefully this whole area will be really covered in flowers the whole summer long.